you know, it's a more moist air time. Ugh, sorry for using the word moist. For this week's vlog, I thought it would be kind of fun to go through the start to finish of creating a new product. I'm currently working on bath salts that I'm hoping to have available for my Mother's Day market that I am doing. Well, I'm doing two markets the weekend of Mother's Day. One is like kind of a big event, takes place on a farm. That's the Saturday event. And then the second one is like an in-store pop-up for like locally made products. So that one's a little bit more low-key, but I'm hoping to have bath salts at both of them. And so since this has all happened like fairly recently, it's kind of fresh in my mind. And so I feel like I can sort of talk through the process in a way that is hopefully helpful and interesting. It gives you a little bit of background into what happens when I decide to make a new product and then actually have to execute it. So first I'll just start with my sort of mindset about creating new products and like when is the right time to create a new product and what's the ideal process for that sort of thing. So for me, especially being in my first year of business, I am very curious just about what my customer wants, what works and what doesn't. And I think I easily could have just stayed on soap for my whole first year, but I am afraid that just with the way that my brain works and the things that I'm interested in and the balance of challenge and creativity and the desire to feel like I've mastered something, like I need a balance of all of those things. And so after a while with the soap where I felt like, okay, this is a little bit second nature. I don't feel as excited by the challenge of creating something and then, oh my gosh, it turned out right, you know, like that, the newness of that went away for me. And that's when I was like, okay, well, I still really like making this, but I want to introduce other things so that I am also experiencing the excitement of creating something new and researching new products. And for me, I'm just always going to need kind of a balance of those things. I think that that's why, why I struggled with some of my previous jobs that were more traditional, was because I wasn't really in control of that balance. You know, you can't always go up to your boss and say like, all right, I think I've got this down and I'm kind of bored now. So I need something that's both interesting and challenging, but not too hard. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. But since I am in charge of how this goes, I'm trying to do that for myself so that I stay engaged and stay passionate and don't get burnt out because I'm not like loving what I'm doing all the time. I also get a lot of feedback when I go to in-person events or on social media from people saying like, have you ever thought about making this? Like, are you going to be offering this anytime soon? So I know that there's interest in some of these other products, which is also hard for me to resist. You know, just like as someone who's trying to grow a business, if somebody says, hey, would you want to make this thing? It sort of implies that they would then buy it. And if they're interested in it, probably other people are too. So it's definitely appealing to think like, oh, well, here's another potential source of income for me. So that also drives a little bit of the curiosity as well. The first step for me, it's not like necessarily a strict chronological process where it's like, I do this thing first and then I do this and then I do that. I'm always kind of playing around with different things. And so for me, the beginning steps are kind of a mixture of doing some light market research, you know, not only hearing from my existing customers about what they're interested in, but also seeing what kind of products seem to be popular with other businesses like mine. Maybe just like hearing more about certain things, getting ads on Pinterest, you know, just any of that sort of stuff where things are popping up more regularly, seeing that kind of feedback out there, doing that research on my own. And then also at the same time, I'm trying to research what would go into making that thing. And that can look a few different ways. YouTube is my go-to, obviously. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, and I also just love watching people make things. It's very I don't know, it's very relaxing and I enjoy it. So I'm never gonna shy away from looking up on YouTube videos of how to make, you know, bath bombs or whatever. So that's something that I do. I also research ingredients, you know, what are the ingredients that traditionally go into this type of product. There seems to be a bit of a range whenever I do this of on the one end of the spectrum, it's trying to be as all natural as possible. And then on the other end of the spectrum is usually the sort of, maybe they're brightly colored, maybe they've got glitter, decorations, you know, just all different kinds of stuff and all different kinds of features. You know, a bath bomb that's all natural probably doesn't foam as much, but if you want something that is foamy and creates bath art, like there's products that do that, but then you have to research like, what are the implications of that product or that ingredient? That takes a lot of time too, because it's definitely a tough balance. You sell a product based on its features, and some people want the features to be that it's all natural, but some people want exciting features, which are usually the ones that take more synthetic products. And so it's tricky to figure out like, what does my audience want? I personally fall somewhere kind of in the middle. I'm not like a super strict all natural ingredient person for myself. I do like working that way with my products because I think it keeps it a little bit simple when someone's asking me about things at an event, asking me about my ingredients. It's a lot easier for me to confidently talk about ingredients that I know where they come from, what they are. Some of these chemical ingredients is like, you can research for a long time and still be confused about what they are, if they're harmful, if they're not. There's usually differing opinions. There's a lot of information out there, and I'm not a scientist, even though I play with a lot of stuff and make things with chemicals in them and chemical reactions. I don't consider myself like far and away the most knowledgeable on all of that, so I want to be cautious about what I put into my products that I can talk about knowledgeably. I also factor in the time of year when I'm deciding on what new products I'm gonna launch. Like I launched my candles when I launched my holiday collection last winter because obviously it's candle season. Candles are such an easy purchase in the winter and especially before the holidays. So that was sort of a no-brainer. It's like, that's a great time to launch candles. And I had been thinking I was gonna launch a larger candle size this summer, but the reality is that although people buy candles all summer long, it's not the primary time to buy candles when it's 80 degrees outside and you're at a farmer's market or an event. And so that's why I liked the idea of going towards bath salts, because I think that bath salts have Epsom salt in them. People are outdoors, they're more active, they might be taking baths because their muscles are sore. A bath salt with Epsom salt in it is a great way to just like soothe yourself. I think people like the idea of adding a fragrance, but in a way that isn't too heavy. You know, my bath bombs I'd like to include oils in, but I don't know that people want a lot of oils again in the summer. Like you're fairly, you know, it's a more moist air time. Ugh, sorry for using the word moist. I probably should have put a trigger warning up before that. The next step after that really is just sort of buying the ingredients I think I want and playing around with the recipe. So it's not only, especially with like bath salts, it's not like soap where there are like certain requirements on the amounts of ingredients because of the chemical reaction that happens with the lye and the oils. Like I can't really, you have to be very careful about not messing that up, or you could have like a really lye heavy soap or a soap that doesn't harden enough. Like that stuff's very particular. Soap is the most picky in terms of the formulation. Bath salts, it's more about a combination of the aesthetics of it. You know, pink Himalayan salt has like a very visual element to it. Like the more salt is in there, the more that like pinky coarse salt is going to be prominent, whereas the Epsom salt is more finely ground and it's white, the baking soda is white. Just figuring out like not only the mix I want in terms of the functionality of the product, but also the visual aspect of it. So that's the bath salts. It's a little bit lower risk. You know, ultimately, I could just pour a cup of Epsom salt into a bath and you'd be fine. It's not the product I want to offer because you could just do that for yourself. I want to put something together that's a little bit more special, a little bit more cared for. So that's really what I'm tweaking, is like, what's the visual makeup of this? I do have to consider the costs. Like, certain ingredients are more expensive than others. So if I increase the proportion of that ingredient, I have to make sure that this still fits within the cost that is reasonable for my product. And so just playing around a little bit with that. And then the recipe also, part of playing around with that is, what is it gonna smell like? So far, I only have one product that's unscented. That's my unscented soap. Everything else, the fragrance is a factor, especially with something like with bath salts, where I'm just going to be offering one kind. It's different than like when I launched the candles, because I had 5 different fragrances. So I could be a little bit less picky about that, because I just knew that I had to have 5 that like sort of covered my bases. When there's just one product, it is a little bit more pressure in terms of deciding like, okay, what's the best fragrance for this sort of thing, and like, what do I think people are gonna want? And like with my shower steamers, it was kind of the same thing. Like, I had originally thought I was gonna launch 3 different fragrances of the shower steamers when I did, and then it was a little bit like, I was just, I was putting too much on my plate, to be honest. And so I stuck with the tea tree, eucalyptus, and mint, because for most people, the idea of a shower steamer, I think, is ideally to just sort of like wake you up, refresh you. Most people take morning showers, I think. I have no basis for that. I'm just going off of, I don't know, my own life. But so I felt pretty good about that. I think down the road, it would be also great to offer other fragrances, but I want to test the product first. And so right now, with launching the bath salts, I'm only going to do 1 fragrance, and I have to figure out what is someone really looking for when they're picking up bath salts. It could be leaning towards like a calming sort of lavender vibe, because I think a lot of people take baths before bed. So maybe that's what they're looking for. Maybe somebody wants something that feels a little bit more medicinal. Like I said, if you're putting in bath salts because you're sore from exercising more or being outside, and you want something that feels soothing, you might want something that's a little bit more herbal. Or, I don't know, maybe people are looking for like a floral. Maybe this is something they're gonna gift other people. They want like a really pretty floral scent. It's kind of a crapshoot in a lot of ways. And down the road, I'd love to be able to do a little bit more of like a focus group kind of thing. But at this point, I just don't have the bandwidth to organize that. So I'm kind of just going off of my instincts. Sometimes they work in my favor and sometimes they don't. Next is what I consider the hardest part of this whole process with pretty much any of the products I use. Even though the formulation is tricky, packaging is by far the most challenging part of the process of a new product for me. Partially, I do this to myself. Like, I have very high standards for packaging, not only in my own products, but in the things that I buy from other people. And I want to, like, from the beginning, starting this business, I didn't want it to come across as your sort of like typical handmade products. I wanted it to look as close to professional as possible, because I think that that's a trade-off a lot of people make when they buy local or buy small. And I don't want them to have to do that. Like, I'd love to be able to offer something that looks as beautiful as, you know, a mainstream product line does, but has the benefits of, like, you can meet the person who made it for you and it was made in your community. Those sorts of things that people like about locally made things, without the trade-off of, you know, not the best packaging. So because of that, I put a lot of pressure on myself to make it look good. When I started with the soaps, there was just one kind of product, and so it took me a little bit of time to figure out like what's the right vibe for those, but I'm happy with where I settled. And then when I introduced the candles, it was a matter of, how does this product look like it belongs in this brand but isn't identical? Like, I still want it to be its own thing. And so there's a little bit more detail to the candles. They definitely have their own vibe, but even just finding like what's the container I put it in took so long. I looked at so many things, and especially with like supply chain issues, sometimes it takes a really long time to get all of the samples of packaging that I want. So with the bath salts, I've gone back and forth a lot. There's obviously the option to do something harder, like a glass jar, or a pouch is also very common for bath salts. And wrapped up in all of this visual stuff is also being as eco-friendly as possible. I really try not to put anything in plastic if I can avoid it. My shower steamers are in a compostable bag on the inside, so it looks like plastic, but you can compost it at home. And this was the same sort of thing. I personally prefer the visual look of a glass jar to a pouch, but I also don't want to necessarily, even though it's glass, like I don't necessarily want to be putting a bunch of jars into the world that don't need to be there. And I found pouches that I really like from a company that is, they're just making like great stuff. But even then, it's like they have recyclable pouches and compostable pouches. And then it's a matter of like, okay, which one of these do I want to do? So at first I thought compost first, and then I was like, well, technically more people probably recycle than compost. So they're just throwing the compost one in the garbage. Is it actually helping? So then I looked at the recyclable one, but I noticed on the product photos that it's a recycle, like the number is a number 4, and Milwaukee area, we don't recycle number 4 plastics anyway. So I was like, okay, so that wouldn't actually be recyclable for a lot of my customers. So I went back to the compostable one. I'm hoping people compost them, or I don't know, figure something out. But either way, so I bought a bunch of those, and in terms of a pouch, I love the way they look. I still don't prefer the look of a pouch. It's just, I don't know why. It's like a very weird specific thing I can't necessarily put my finger on. But so what I figured out after ordering like 3 or 4 different types of jars as well to experiment with, that I thought, okay, well, maybe this is what I do. Maybe I offer 2 different versions of this product. I offer a jar that is a little bit more expensive because it comes in a jar, but it makes it, I don't know, makes it a little bit more presentable. It's gonna look nicer in your bathroom. It might be a nicer gift to give somebody. And then my pouch will technically be the refill of that jar. You can obviously buy the pouch without ever having bought the jar, no problem. But that way I can sort of market it as those 2 things, and it allows me to offer something that visually looks the way I want it to look, and then have the pouch that is maybe like a little bit more sustainable of an option. So I'm very excited about that. I hope that it pays off the way that I want it to. The nice thing about bath salts is that I can fill these jars right before I send them out. There's no cure time. I can have my mix ready to go and then fill the jars as they get ordered. So I'm not like sitting on a bunch of jars. If nobody's interested in the jars and they all just want the pouches, like I won't have wasted a bunch of jars, if that makes sense. So then once I have the actual container, I also have to design the label that goes on it. And again, like, this is why I don't know, I get like so bogged down by a lot of these things, because there's a lot to factor in. Obviously there are requirements for what I need to include. Like obviously the net weight of the product needs to go on all of my stuff. The ingredients need to go on all of my packaging. For certain products, I need to put my address for my studio, like where specifically this is made. Candles, you're required to put the address of where it's made on it. Like candles require a warning label. There's just like all this stuff to factor in. And so then I also have to decide like, how does that layout look nice? And again, this is where balancing the brand comes in. Some of my products have very intricate botanical illustrations on them, and some of my products are much more clean and streamlined. And so for me, it's figuring out like which way do either of those things, which way am I gonna lean towards either one of those things for a new product. And with the bath salts, I think I'm leaning towards like pretty clean and minimal. I'm looking at I have all my products on my shelves over here. So like as I'm talking about these things, if I'm looking over this direction, it's because I'm sitting right in front of the shelf full of products. But you know, it's also like how to incorporate color. Like, do I put color on this packaging? And for all of this stuff, there's a lot of back and forth. And it's also tricky because sometimes it's hard to get a good mock-up of what I want without just printing it. And then I don't want to waste a bunch of stuff either while I'm doing that. So I don't know. I prepare, if you've been following me for a while, if you just are starting following me now, just prepare in general that like my packaging will change fairly routinely. I haven't bought anything in crazy numbers. I just haven't bought like, you know, 2,000 candle tins or anything. So sometimes when I get to the end of it, it's like, okay, is it time to revisit this? Because I don't want to weigh myself down during this process and prevent myself from launching a product because I'm waiting for the exact right thing to happen or the exact right thing to come along. But I also then sometimes the product is out there and it's like, all right, I think I could do better. So in 2 months, it could look totally different. Who knows? But I think I've finally gotten to a place where I'm feeling good about the packaging options, the recipe, narrowing down the fragrance still. And I'm excited to put it all together and have it at this market and see how it goes with these like Mother's Day purchases and just people out and about looking at this kind of stuff. And then that's where this whole feedback loop starts. So hearing from people, seeing it directly, like I might tweak it. This is the fun part of doing all of this. It's stressful, but it's good stressful because it presents challenges that ultimately have a solution. It's just a matter of like trying out new things. So I hope this was helpful. I feel like I rambled a lot. I have notes. You might not be able to tell, but I do have notes when I start doing these conversations with myself. But anyway, I appreciate you if you're still here watching. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Thank you for your support. Feel free to subscribe so you get alerted to any new videos I put up. And if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button so that I can reach more viewers like you.